Hello everyone, 24 here, and welcome to a very special spooky episode here. I like Halloween, but I think most people do. I mean, you got candy, you got monsters, and that's about it. Which is kind of weird, because as a kid, I got really easily scared by things. Like, the only stuff I could watch around the Halloween season would be, I guess, safe stuff, like Halloween specials that never really went into full-on horror territory. I think the closest was certain episodes and movies of Scooby-Doo, like Zombie Island. But yeah, outside of that, I never really got big into the whole monster thing because they scared me. And even to this day, I don't really sit down and watch like the horror movie monster stuff. I mean, I still watch Halloween stuff, like I really like Caroline or Paranorman, but I kind of stay away from the monster stuff. Which is weird because I have this, like, out-of-universe fascination with them. And for this Halloween season, I want to do a monster mash. I don't know why, but I really like the idea of two monsters facing off against each other. I think part of it is that when superheroes do it, you know at some point they're going to team up and help stop a greater evil. But with monsters, that's not really a guarantee. They themselves are villains, and your kind of goal is to hope both of them die. I mean, you got Freddy vs. Jason, Alien vs. Predator, Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, and science fiction actually I think lends itself to this because, well, horror stories and science fiction really go together. I mean, the first recognized science fiction novel, or at least the modern one, is Frankenstein. So yeah, to reiterate, this Halloween season I want to do a monster mash, but tying it back to Stargate, we're going to find two monsters in the Stargate universe and have them battle. And keeping with the themes of Frankenstein, we need a mad scientist, and thankfully we have one in the form of Michael. Now if you don't know who Michael is, Michael used to be a Wraith who the Atlantis expedition had used a retrovirus on. The retrovirus was a virus that turns a Wraith into a human. They actually did this to him I think at least twice, and eventually it resulted in him becoming a half-human, half-Wraith hybrid. And unfortunately he found himself being hunted by both Wraith and human. So he elected to make his own creatures to defend himself. There's a lot more to go into with Michael, but for this video I want to do a what would happen if two of the monsters he made battled with each other. In this corner we have the bug people. Yeah, so I guess the official name for this creature Michael made is bug people, but they also have like 6 other names. I think Super Wraith is the best, and that's what I'm going with. The Super Wraith was created in a process similar to the Wraith's quote-unquote natural evolution. Michael would let an Aratus bug gorge itself on a human, which led to the death of the human in case you were wondering, and Michael would wait until the bug had passed the genetic material it had ingested onto its offspring's egg. Michael would then begin his genetic manipulations on the egg and eventually found a balance between strength, agility, and resistance. This resulted in a creature that was far more animalistic in appearance and behavior compared to normal Wraith. They possess insectoid-style heads with mandibles surrounding their mouth, their arms were longer and only possessed 3 digits. When it comes to pros in combat, they have greater strength, agility, and resilience compared to humans, Wraith, or later hybrids. They also have an exoskeleton covering their bodies with a hard shell on their back that gave them the ability to survive direct fire from some weapons. We also see they have some kind of regeneration ability, although to be honest it's a little hard to tell. We see Ronan cut the arm off of one, and I assume we see the Atlantis team kill it later, but that's assuming it's the same one as Michael had others in that facility. But I think it would make sense the creatures have some sort of regeneration ability, since so do the Wraith. When it comes to their weaknesses, their abdominal region lacks armor and makes it a vulnerable spot to kill them. Despite seemingly having good control over the creatures, Michael would later come to the conclusion that these experiments were crude and discontinued making them in favor of more intelligent hybrids. And in this corner we have Michael's experiments. Yeah, unlike the last creature which had plenty of other things we could call it, these things are just called Michael's experiments. Okay. These creatures were one of the earliest versions of Michael's hybrids. Similar to the later hybrids, these creatures were created by humans being kidnapped and forced to undergo experiments. However, these creatures were not just a combination between human and a Wraith's bug DNA. They had the genetic material of at least several other life forms in them. This led to many genetic differences between them and the later hybrids. One of these differences being that their alterations were permanent. Overall, they appear roughly human with some noticeable differences. For one, they were blind as they had layers of skin covering their eyes and some kind of teeth situation going on here. However, they were able to find their prey through advanced hearing. And similar to the Super Wraith, their behavior was also animalistic. When it comes to pros in combat, in addition to their advanced hearing, they were capable of scaling walls on their hands and feet. They also had gills on their necks which could secrete a gas compound which took the form of fog. This was a predatory tool rather than a defensive one, which they used in hunting, hiding them from their prey, messing with electronics, and possibly having other long-term exposure effects that we don't really know about. And finally, they were capable of moving very quickly. When it comes to cons, the most obvious one is that they're blind. Yes, they do have great hearing to make up for this, but it is still a flaw. They also make this clicking noise, and while this maybe does some form of echolocation, and that is pure speculation on my part, it does give away their location in the fog. They also appear to be very easy to kill with standard Earth weapons. The only other thing to mention as a con is that Michael could never control them, which shows how wild they are. Now, before we get to the stats and the scenario I'm going to set up, I want to comment on something. While this will be a one-on-one fight, I want to look at how these creatures work with others of their kind. From what I can see, while the Super Wraiths are said to not have communication ability, they seemingly can work with others of their own kind, like here where they surround Ronan. The experiments, meanwhile, don't really seem to have that level of cooperation. The closest we get is when two pull a guy out a window. But outside of that, I get the impression these creatures are solo hunters. They won't attack others of their own kind, but they don't really do cooperation. However, I should note the cooperation we saw with the Super Wraiths was when they were under Michael's control, so we don't really know what they would do if they were out in the wild on their own. Again, this is going to be a one-on-one fight, but if people bring it up in the comments and ask, hey, well, if this was a 5-on-5 fight or a 1-on-5, this would be a factor to consider. So when we look at the stats for these two creatures, we see that the Super Wraith is strong, fast, and tough, though there are chinks in their armor that can be exploited. The experiments meanwhile have speed, and the fog they create levels the playing field to make up for their lack of eyesight, since now their opponent can't see. And their advanced hearing gives them an edge in a situation like this, since they can hear where their opponent is. But they still lack the advantage of eyesight and the raw strength, speed, and resilience that the Super Wraith has. As for the scenario on how these two would fight, well, let me tell you all a tale. In the aftermath of the events of Whispers, as the surviving members of the Atlantis team leave, things begin to stir in the underground below. One of the experiment pods opens, the stasis lock not deactivating until now for some unknown reason. The experiment begins moving and looking around for something to eat. It stumbles and listens around in the dark until it nears the surface, and somewhere off in the distance, it hears it.
Let's go play house. Let's go play house.
At the same time this happens, deeper in the facility, somewhere in a dark room, something hatches from a cocoon. Similar to the creature above, this creature can only think of one thing. Moving quickly, it begins making its way to the surface. Using all its senses, it begins tracking down where it can find some food. Night falls over a village. Some of the people in the village still get spooked when it gets dark, scared one of their loved ones will go missing in the morning, like in their last village. It doesn't help that a fog is rolled in. Some are more spooked now than others since that fool went back to the old village, looking for his wife. Then, in the dark foggy night, two screams are heard at opposite ends of the village. People are running out of their homes to see what caused the screams. Some fear the curses follow them to this new village. A boy stands outside his home, standing around as the adults ask around where the screams are coming from, trying to find out what's going on in this thick, murky fog. When suddenly... Panic ensues as people are running like mad. Some rush back into their homes to check on their families to make sure they're okay. Others to board themselves in or grab anything they can use as a weapon to go back outside and help defend the village from whatever was attacking them. Some run out of the village itself completely. One boy, though, stands outside his home, hesitating only for a second before running back in to save his mother, only to be met with a large creature that looks like some sort of bug man standing over his dead mother. The creature turns to face the boy and roars. The boy's flight instincts kick in, mostly the flight part, and he runs. He gets lost in the village he grew up in as the fog obscures everything. He screams for help as he hears the creature running behind him, getting ever closer. But seems no one's opening their doors now, and he can't find anyone in this thick fog. Then he sees them, a person standing in the road. He runs to that person, hoping their home is nearby and they can find shelter, all the while not noticing the strange clicking noise that grew ever louder the closer he got. As he touches the person on the shoulder, the person turns around and he's met with a horrid face, skin covering their eyes and monstrous teeth. It screams a horrid scream and lunges at the boy, but by some miracle of the ancestors, he jumps far enough out of the way with enough space to save his life. He falls to the ground and begins scooting away from the second monster, only to stop when he hears a heavy set of footprints behind him. He turns slowly and sees the outline of the first monster no more than a foot behind him. This is it, the boy thinks. This is how I die. But then the boy notices the creature isn't really looking at him. It almost looks like it's looking straight ahead at... The boy turns and sees the second creature seems to have forgotten his presence as well. It's now, well, not looking, but it's turned its head so its ears facing the first monster, as it keeps making that strange clicking noise. The first monster lets out a mighty roar. In response, the second creature lets out its horrid screech. The boy sees this as his chance and he darts into an alleyway, hoping it will lead to, well, anywhere but here. The two creatures continue to stare/hear the other out, both thinking the same thing. This thing in front of the other wasn't food. No, it was competition for the food. And neither can allow this to be the case. A few more seconds pass between the two before both give out their loudest roar, such screech they can make, and then they make their first move. And we're going to have the video end there. Now wait, let me explain. See, for this video, I'm going to do a bit of an experiment. There's going to be two parts to this. The first part you're watching now, and the second part, which if everything goes as planned, I will release at the end of October. Again, if everything goes as planned. In the intermediate time, you, yes you, the people at home, can have an influence on how this video will end. How, you might ask? By going to the new Reddit page. Yep, this channel now has a Reddit page. And the first post will be a vote between who you think will win, the Super Wraith or Michael's experiments. Now keep in mind, I'm only going to count votes that are on the Reddit page. Unless you make a really, really good argument in the comment section, then I may consider that a vote. Maybe. Possibly. So that's what we're doing, people. So if you have an opinion on who you think would win, go to the Reddit page and cast your vote. And then, again, hopefully, if all things go as planned, at the end of the month, I will release a second video as a follow-up to this, in which I will finish the story I've been telling here, go over the winner, and my own final thoughts, and anything else I can think of for that. So yeah, until then, go cast your vote, and remember...
Alien. The movie Alien. They use the air shafts to move around the ship.
And then systematically killed the entire crew one by one. Thank you for bringing that up.
They didn't kill them all.